Every day it became harder for the defenders of Odessa. The enemy ring was shrinking. The enemy spared no effort to seize the city. Fighting near Odessa distracted a lot of his troops, thwarted the plans of the German command. The Black Sea Fleet did everything possible to help the besieged garrison. There was not a day that the ships did not get under Odessa. They supported our troops by fire, delivered replenishment, ammunition, and food. To help the defenders of the city, the Soviet command decided to land a naval landing in the rear of the enemy near the village of Grigorievka. The place of landing was not chosen by chance. The fascists turned the area of Grigorievka, Novaya, and Staraya Definovka into a powerful stronghold. Here stood artillery batteries that destroyed the city and shelled the port. Sailors prepared for the landing thoroughly and comprehensively. Landing troops covertly practiced landing on ships and landing with the help of small watercraft. Fighters learned to storm the coast, make passes in the barriers, quickly entrench themselves, rapid offensive and steadfast defense. The preparation of landing troops led Rear Admiral Sergei Gorshkov. There were exercises on the ships and in the headquarters. The attention of the commanders of the ships was particularly focused on the organization of artillery support for the landing troops. In the evening of September 21st, cruisers Red Caucasus and Red Crimea, destroyers Boyki and Imperfect took on board the 2nd Marine Regiment, formed mainly from volunteers from the ships, and took a course for Odessa. Merciless also participated in the operation. In the afternoon, I received an order from the fleet commander, no later than 23 hours on September 21st, to deliver to Odessa 3 transports with troops, equipment, ammunition, and gasoline. Our trip pursued a dual purpose to divert the attention of the enemy and give reinforcements to the garrison. Transports, already loaded, were waiting for us in Dezerigach and Yarilgach bays. At 13.00 the destroyer approached them and raised the signal buki. I passed semaphore order on the marching order, speed and course. Merciless took a place at the head of the formation. In a few minutes the transports were aligned in a Kielvater column, and our caravan started on its way. We had not had time to pass a few miles, as there was a report of the signalman Sergeyev. On the right 30 I see 6 airplanes coming towards us. By habit I turned the handles of the machine telegraph to full ahead, declared a combat alarm, and ordered to tell the transports to evade the attack of the planes. At my signal the ships turn away in different directions, the first and the third to the right, the second to the left. We already hear the whistle of bombs. Steeply turn the ship. Explosions rumble astern. Foam waterfall falls on the deck. Anti-aircraft guns of the Merciless are hitting at full speed, trying to block the airplane's way to the transports with a wall of barrage fire. Artillerymen of transports are also firing. The fascists cannot withstand the planes' drop bombs early and leave the zone of fire. From the transports come reports no damage or casualties. The caravan is again built in a keel column and follows its own course. Merciless anti-submarine Zigzag goes ahead. The sun was at its zenith when the chief signalman Kuksov reported to me that we are overtaken by the destroyer Frunze under the flag of the squadron commander. Raise the signal, I wish you a happy voyage, I ordered. Frunze soon disappeared over the horizon. And I kept looking after him and puzzled why Vladimirsky goes to Frunze. And where are the other ships? Did they cancel the landing? Maybe the Rear Admiral went out earlier to clarify the situation on the spot. After all, it was he who was entrusted with commanding the landing. Dusk has fallen. We follow the fairway on the right Tendrovskaya spit, on the left minefields. I refuse to zigzag. I order to keep the course as accurately as possible. A small mistake is enough, and you will explode on your own mines. 170 on the left. 2 cruisers and 2 destroyers are overtaking the transports at full speed. I hear the signalman's voice. We're exchanging call signs. They're landing craft. That means the operation is underway. I wanted to sing with joy. I took out my pipe and smoked with pleasure. The mighty ships rushed past. Our caravan slowly follows its course. It's getting dark. The sea is quiet, peaceful. But the war does not subside for a minute. It reminds of itself sometimes in the most unexpected ways. A cipher operator came up to me on the bridge and gave me a radiogram. I read it, and my heart clenched. Radiogram Fleet Commander Oktyabrsky reports that the destroyer Frunze sunk by enemy aircraft. The fate of Rear Admiral Vladimirsky and the crew of the ship is unknown. The leadership of the landing is entrusted to Rear Admiral, tells how Seletsky was left without pants. The engineer lieutenant led the emergency party. The compartment was waist-deep in water. The officer undressed and worked in his underwear. And then a new leak appeared. Chief Petty Officer Vakulenko started looking for something to plug the hole. He saw his pants lying there, grabbed them and shoved them into the hole. The engineer lieutenant, having finished his work, started to look for his pants, but they were gone. Vakulenko was stunned. These were your pants. I used them to plug the hole. So Seletsky would have flaunted in his underpants, but the sailors got him some sailcloth work pants. Seletsky laughs with everyone. He himself in turn tells some funny story. There are plenty of them these days. It's good that people are having fun, that not even a shadow of gloom can be seen on the ship, which has just been on the verge of destruction. The general mood carries over to me. I send a messenger for an accordion. A satisfied sailor brought the instrument. I stretched out the bellows, took a few chords and danced. In the cramped cabin, of course, not to dance. But the faces of the men bloomed with smiles. Well, what shall we sing? I asked my friends, interrupting the game for a moment. About Ermak, Lushin suggests. The atmosphere is right, the storm is roaring, the rain is falling, and we are resting after the battle. Just like in the song. And the song about the Russian Bogatyr, who loved his homeland more than life. A friendly chorus drowns out the sounds of the accordion, no matter how much I press on the bellows. In the corridor the sailors are gathering, also pulling up. People have forgotten about the storm, about the rocking, about the trouble. They've finished the song. Silence reigns, broken only by the wind whistling and the waves hitting the ship's side. A messenger shows up at the door of the cabin, informs that the destroyer Sobrazitelny has arrived and asks permission to take us in tow. Take your places. I turn to my comrades. And remember, maritime culture in the Navy is always required, even if your ship is left without a bow. Kabistov meets me on the bridge. He has already ordered the tugboat to give the end. Good, I approve. Let's continue to act independently. Play Avril. Kabistov smiles. I completely forgot that we do not work emergency calls. Avral has to be played with a horn. Comrades from the Sobrazitelny look at our ship with fear and respect. We, looking from the outside, would probably also wonder how such a stump keeps on the water. And perhaps that is why our sailors are working on the deck in an emphasized calm and businesslike manner, trying to show with all their appearance, with all their organization, the merciless is alive. The wind began to subside. From a gap in the clouds, 2 of our fighters appeared. They flew over us, shaking their wings in a friendly manner. Soon, on the tow of the Sobrazitelny, the Bezpochadniy entered the Bay of Sevastopol. While waiting for further orders, Bezpochadniy stood on a barrel in the South Bay. In the morning, the Chief of Staff of the Squadron Andreev arrived. Captain First Rank congratulated on a successful passage and asked to tell about everything that had happened. We sat in my cabin, which was damaged a little less than the others. Andreev took a pipe out of his pocket, filled it, and held out a kit set. Golden fleece, it had been a long time since I had tasted this marvelous tobacco. Don't be jealous, smiled Vladimir Alexandrovich. I'm finishing the last of my cigarettes. It won't be long before we get such a treat. As was his custom, Andreev took out a notebook and a pencil. He always talks like that with a pencil in his hand, so as not to miss some interesting thought. I reported on the completion of the task, the fight with enemy planes, the damage to the ship, the death of sailor Kolesnichenko. Vladimir Alexandrovich listened to the story about how we cut off the half-bank with an axe with the keenest interest. Gee, he laughed. Try to tell about it somewhere they won't believe it. They will call you a fantasist. I expressed confidence that if the plant helps us, the repair will take no more than a month. Andreev shook his head. Don't rely on the plant. It has been evacuated to the Caucasian coast. There are only a few specialists and the most modest equipment left here. We know about it, I said. We will repair it ourselves. Let only the factory train our sailors a little, give them tools and materials. And we have already set up repair crews. Come, show me the damage. Andreev got up from the sofa. He and I looked all over the ship. Vladimir Alexandrovich examined the rips, holes, corrugations in the hull plating, tried the reliability of the support fastenings with his hands. We fought well for the survivability of the ship, he praised. And you have a lot of work to do. Here in Sevastopol, of course, you can't fix everything. At least rivet a new nose to reach the Caucasus. Andreev promised to agree today with the factory to give us instructors from experienced workers. Put them in charge of the brigades. I know the local masters, they will teach the sailors everything in 2 days. Already at the gangway, Andreev offered me. Come with me. Let's visit Vladimirsky. He's alive. I exclaimed joyfully. He's alive. But he also needs some repairs. He's in the hospital. We were all worried about him. You know him, he doesn't think about himself at all. When Franz was sunk, our admiral, being wounded himself, led the rescue of the crew. The boat took us to the pier at Pavlovsky Cape. Andreev warned me. Don't tell Vladimirsky about the damage to the ship. He mustn't worry. He was interested in Bezpochadniy. I said that everything is all right, he should come soon. The boat pushed gently against the pier. We went ashore. The morning was clear, sunny. The city was silent. It was broken only by the hum of tugboats going back and forth in the bay. At the hospital, a nurse blocked our way, saying that the head of the department forbade anyone to be allowed to Vladimirsky. Sister, pleaded Andreev, I have brought the commander of the ship. He brought good news from the front. It will be more beneficial than all your medicines. The sister sighed, looked around and whispered, All right, go. But not for long. We enter the ward. Vladimirsky is standing at the window. When he hears our footsteps, he turns to us. He's in hospital pajamas, pale, gaunt. One eye is hidden by a bandage. He recognized us, smiled welcomingly. Hello, hello. Sit down. We inquire about his well-being. Vladimirsky waves his hand. What's the matter with his well-being? You see, he's under strict arrest. You'd better tell me, he turns to me, how you managed to get there without a nose. Are there many dead and wounded? Andreev and I looked at each other. The Admiral already knows everything, so hide something from him. I tell him everything as it was. Wait, why are you silent about your contusion? And he knows it too. It was nothing, I said. I just tried to see which was stronger, my leg or the ship. And what was it? The ship was stronger, so I got a bruise on my thigh. In the middle of the conversation, the doctor on duty entered the room, a pretty but very strict woman in a white coat. She pounced on us like a tiger. Who let you in here? Go away now. Let the wounded man rest. Comrade doctor, Andreev began to persuade her, allow us at least a minute to talk. Imagine our situation: a superior and a subordinate met, who did not hope to see each other again. And suddenly they see each other alive. They're both a little scratched up, but that'll go away with your help. You do miracles around here. You could say you bring the dead back to life. What would we do without you doctors? It's safe to say you're the backbone of this fleet. Sailors remember your skillful, caring hands all their lives. Vladimir Alexandrovich praised medicine for a few more minutes. His words would have worked on anyone. The doctor gradually changed her anger into mercy. How much more time do you need? She asked, turning back her sleeve and glancing at her watch. 30 minutes. I assure you, this meeting will be good for the patient. Very well. Stay, but no more than 30 minutes, and on the condition that you don't ask for more time. You see? I knew you had a good heart. The doctor looked at Andreev with her brown eyes, smiled and left. Well, you are good at talking. Vladimir Alexandrovich, laughed the Admiral. "You don't compose poetry for nothing." Captain First Rank went to the door, closed it tightly, and took a bottle out of his pocket. "Now let's drink to the meeting. Lev Anatolievich, I got you some of your favourite Riesling. Miraculous moisture cures all ills." Vladimirsky started looking for glasses. There were only two. I noticed a mug on the window, rinsed it with water from the decanter, put it on the table. "Excellent," Andreev said, opening the bottle. We drank to the victory and for the speedy recovery of the Admiral. "How do you think to repair the Bezpochadniy?" Vladimirsky asked. I acquainted him with our preliminary plans. Look properly at the plant. There should be blanks for destroyer hulls. Maybe you'll get yourself a new nose. Vladimirsky sighed. The task before you is not easy. Surgeons, when they sew missing parts to the body, call the operation plastic. So you have to sew a new nose to the Ruthless, which, weighs many dozens of tons. We said our goodbyes. It was felt that the Admiral was very pleased with the meeting with us. On October 10th, 1941, Bezpochadniy was put into the dock. Sailors turned into shipbuilders. Vladimirsky was right. On the territory of the factory we found the necessary blanks, kit parts, cut sheets of hull plating. All that remained was to rivet them together. This only meant to fit the multi-ton parts to each other, to drill tens of thousands of holes in them, and to put as many rivets. Luckily for us, the factory kept pneumatic drills and hammers. The crackle of these hammers, loud and sharp, like machine gun bursts, now began in the morning and quieted down in the late evening. But the work had to be frequently interrupted. On Sevastopol raided enemy planes. Air raid sirens forced sailors and workers to leave their places and hide in shelters. While they were sitting there, the burners cooled down. The rivets had to be heated up again. And it happened, people only have time to do it, when a new alarm makes them leave everything again. Mechanical engineer Kozinets appealed to me with a request to allow riveting crews during the alarms not to leave their workplaces, and to organize their work in 3 shifts around the clock. And in order not to demask the ship at night by the light of burners, sailors will build a tent of tarpaulin, cover the entire half bay. I went with this proposal to the fleet commander. He authorized it. The sailors rejoiced. Now, no raids could chase them into the shelter. The work didn't stop day or night. At first the work was slow. Mastery does not come at once, and riveting is a delicate art. A sailor lets a pneumatic hammer, it shakes in his hands and hits anywhere, but not on the rivet. While the sailor is getting used to it, the rivet has already cooled down. Cut it down, knock it out and put a new one. It is necessary to heat rivets skillfully. If you overheat it, it loses strength. The seam will have to be redone. If you don't heat it up, you can't unrivet it. Failures made the sailors angry, but they also taught them. Everyone had to learn from their own mistakes willy-nilly who would be interested in redoing the same work several times. Brigadiers, experienced masters from the factory, were more picky than our Kozinets. The quality was strictly monitored, and at first the sailors put only a few dozen rivets for the whole day. Only after the sailors got their hands full, the question arose not only about quality, but also about quantity. Brigadiers raised the norm to 300 rivets per shift. Individual sailors began to give 500. This norm was more to the liking of the crew and was accepted as mandatory. Enemy air raids became more frequent. Sometimes bombs fell not far from the dock. I, the Commissar, and Kabistov during the alarms always tried to be on the ship. Emergency parties were on standby. It was of no great practical importance. If a bomb hit the dock, no emergency parties would save the ship. The value of this duty was mainly moral. When riveters saw that the emergency parties in place, the bosses near, they worked more calmly. At the first sound of the siren, I went down to the dock. The sailors persuaded me to go to the shelter, convinced me that there was nothing to do here, there was no reason to risk in vain. I joked that I had a bomb plot, and if anything happened, it was more fun together. Booth and Kabistov were here too. Sometimes they took up a hammer or took out the hot rivets from the furnace with pliers. The bombs destroyed the plant badly, but none of them hit the dock. In 20 days we patched all the holes in the ship's hull below the waterline. There were still small holes in the surface. They were plugged with wooden plugs. It will be possible to fill these holes afloat. The construction of a new half-bank was being completed. Stringers, spandrels, bims, pilings and other parts of the ship's kit were firmly attached inside the bow. What was necessary welded or riveted. Sheathing sheets were put in place. Sailors carefully caulked the seams to ensure tightness. It remained to rivet the upper deck planking. However, the work had to be suspended. To stay in the dock was no longer possible. In the last days, German pilots were trying hard to get into it. The situation in the city became more complicated. Fascist troops were already in the Crimea and moved to Sevastopol. The fleet commander ordered to immediately lead the ship to the Caucasian coast. That's why on October 30th we filled the dock with water. There were no tugs. Sailors almost manually took the destroyer out behind the Bezpochadniy, the entrance gate of the dock. Only we were in the bay, there was a buzzing sound announcing an air alert. The machines were warmed up. I ordered to give the go. The ship kept on the water well. We headed for Minna Wharf to replenish supplies and go to sea at night. But in the evening we received an order from the Chief of Fleet Staff, Rear Admiral I.D. Illiceive the transition to postpone tomorrow, October 31st, put in place removed for the time of repair of guns, take on board 400 evacuated workers, and only then follow the destination. I allowed the crew to rest. It got dark, but the sailors did not hurry to their cabins. They gathered on the half-bank, which they had just built with their own hands. It was all right that the deck was uneven, and their feet kept bumping into the nuts and bolts that were used to fasten the sheets of planking that had not yet been riveted. The main thing was that the half-bank was there, the ship was alive again. They even crossed the dock without the help of tugboats. Sailors are sitting in the dark talking. Then they sang a song about Ruthless. To the song, as on a light, people stretched out. They were the workers of the naval factory who had been hiding in the shelter near the mine wharf. Having immediately memorized the refrain, they began to echo the chorus of sailors. There were more and more people on the wall. Girls and women with children appeared. They, too, were tired of sitting in the tunnels in the dim light of dusty lamps. The sailors finished their song. One of the workers shouted from the wall, "Let's get an accordionist on the wharf. I'd like to dance." Booth approached me. "It's been a month since the sailors had a rest. They've been at war or working day and night. Let them have fun." "All right," I agreed. "Let them go to the wall." The happy sailors needed no persuasion. All those who were off watch were at the wharf in no time. Sailor Chernyshenko sat on a pala bollard, for which are attached mooring cables from ships, and widely stretched the bellows of his much-seen accordion. "Krakowiak," demandingly sounded a ringing female voice. "Krakowiak, come on," but with fire. Dancers swam in pairs around the circle. Even those who had never danced before started dancing. It was dark, so no one would see that you were not a first-class dancer. There were plenty of people who wanted to have fun. One dance was followed by another. The fun on the mine wall would have lasted a long time. It was broken by the alarm. The sailors rushed to the ship, their guests to the shelter, to the tunnels. In the morning it became known that at night a group of German tanks broke through almost to the very fraternal cemetery on the slope of Malakoff-Kurgan and shelled the city. Tanks managed to drive away quickly. But the fact remained the front came close to Sevastopol. All over again. A group of sailors headed by Senior Lieutenant Alyoshin went to Sukhanaya Bolka in the morning to get ammunition. A crane with our guns came to Bezpochadniy. They began to install them. The work was going briskly. Sailors worked tirelessly, trying to finish faster what they had no time to do in the dock. A representative of the naval factory brought a list of workers and their families whom we should bring on board. Instead of 400, there were 450. I didn't object. 50 extra passengers is not a problem for us. I warned only that all strictly adhere to order, do not wander in vain on the decks, do not interfere with the crew in case of an alarm. There are many women and children on the list. I ordered to allocate the best cabin for them. The sailors will have nothing to do in it anyway. They will have to be constantly at battle stations during the crossing. Kozinets took a full supply of drinking water. We'll take enough food. The factory sent its cook to help the ship's cooks. A huge sea crane lowered the bow cannon on the destroyer's half bank. Sailors began to fix it, but then over the bay appeared over the enemy planes. The tugboat hastily dragged away from the ship crane's mahina. The bombs fell aside. No sooner had we announced a stand down than a new raid followed. From the board of the Merciless we could see how the clouds of flame and smoke rose above the naval plant, hospital, railway station. Then bombers came again. Now they were targeting the ships. Over the bay, incredible rumble. Fiercely shoot anti-aircraft guns of ships. Bombs are bursting. Clouds of smoke obscured the sun. Overhead, howling Nazi planes, fighting off and dodging from the swift Red Star Hawks. Split into groups, junkers dive on cruisers Chervona Ukraina and Red Caucasus. Only these ships and our Merciless remained in Sevastopol bays. Another group of planes appeared from the railway station. They're coming at us. On the destroyer, only anti-aircraft guns and one gun. We're firing them. Choking, frequent machine guns. The dive bombers dive steeply from the heights. First, second, third. Their bombs fall so close that the water swept by them falls on the deck. The fourth plane drops its bombs. And all is still. Only an ominous, heartbreaking howl is heard. We've already learned to determine the direction of the bomb's flight by the sound. Now we all realized it was flying precisely. Now it would inevitably hit. The artillerymen stopped firing. Machine guns were silent. In this terrible silence, I heard a short metallic bang, and a moment later the ship was thrown upward. A wall of dark dust rose over the wharf. Collapsing into the churning, silt-brown water, the destroyer began to lurch to starboard. Hastily wind up the patch. It does not hold, it is pushed inside the hole. We start the second, larger. The ship is sinking. Strongly tilted, it has already descended to the cut of the half-bank. The tugboats I've called are moored at the side to support the sinking destroyer. Their pumps are pumping out water, but it is not diminishing. We can't use our own pumps, the steam line is damaged. You've got to be kidding me. A 200-kilogram bomb hit the deck, penetrated it, then the second bottom and keel track, buried in the ground under the ship, and only then exploded. The blast wave caused further destruction. It was never possible to put the destroyer on an even keel. In flooded rooms, the water level does not decrease. Again, Kozinets and his men struggle with the patch. Here, it seems, he sat on the breach properly. Water in the compartments went down. I learn that the cruisers were ordered to leave Sevastopol. Hurriedly report to the fleet commander that the destroyer, despite the damage, can make the transition. Vice Admiral Oktyabrsky orders Red Caucasus to take us in tow. The commander of the cruiser, Captain 2nd Rank AM Goshin, waited at the roadstead until the tugs brought the Bezpochadniy to him. We had already started the towing end to the cruiser when the destroyer began to sink again. 2 tugboats hastily picked it up on their moorings and brought it to the wall of the engineering wharf. Yes, it was impossible to think about going to sea. The cruiser at the roadstead for a long time fought off enemy planes, then disappeared over the horizon. Of the warships in Sevastopol remained only our Merciless. We let down divers to clarify the extent of the damage. There are several holes in the bottom. The third boiler room is out of order, fresh and exhaust steam lines are damaged, the bulkheads of the second boiler room and the first turbine room are barely holding, the aft seams have weakened, water is seeping into the cellar and aft cockpit. We should have docked immediately. But all the docks are destroyed. A tugboat with a barge loaded with ammunition arrived from Sukhanaya Bolka. Senior Lieutenant Alyoshin proudly reports that the task has been accomplished. He and the sailors accompanying him are black as Negroes, burned clothes hanging on them in rags. On the head of the sailor Abramies white fresh bandages. It turns out that during the loading near the barge with ammunition exploded bomb. Fire started, noisily blazing pencil cases with gunpowder. Our sailors rushed to save the barge, risking to blow up together with it. Alyoshin brought up a tugboat. Fire brigades managed to douse the fire. In general, all was over. except that Abramis is lightly wounded. But Merciless is fully stocked with ammunition. Permission to begin loading. Alyoshin doesn't know yet that the Merciless is barely on the water, and now we don't have time to load ammunition. I thank the senior lieutenant and the sailors for their service, but I order to postpone loading work for the time being. Only now the officer and his brave crew notice the condition of the destroyer. Abramis sighs loudly. All over again. Yes, we must repair the ship again. But how? There are no more docks or factory. Already, before dusk, junkers once again visited Sevastopol. A small group of them attacked Bezpochadniy. The bombs did not hit us. To stay at the engineering wharf now was doom. Having noticed the ship, fascist pilots will come here again tomorrow. At night, tugboats drag us to the northern dock. Here, too, the Germans do not leave alone. All-day junkers are flying one, 2 at a time. In order not to risk in vain people, I, during the raids, all sent to the tunnels. I leave only emergency parties on the ship. During the next alarm, there was a funny incident. Kabistov with the free sailors ran to the tunnels. Suddenly he heard behind him the characteristic whistle of a falling bomb. "Get down," commanded the lieutenant captain. All threw themselves on the ground. Lied down for several minutes. No explosion. Kabistov rose from the ground, looked around in surprise. "Where is the bomb?" An embarrassed petty officer of the 2nd Article Rybakov came up to the officer. "Excuse me, it's me." "What do you mean?" Kabistov didn't understand. "It was me who whistled." The captain-lieutenant didn't believe it. "Come on, one more." The petty officer stretched out his lips and made a sound remarkably similar to the whistle of a bomb. Kabistov glanced angrily at the petty officer, shook off the dust from his tunic, looked at the sailors. Were they laughing? Those, of course, did not show any sign. They felt the danger of laughter at such a moment. The officer suddenly smiled. "You know what? To hell with it, this addit. The ceiling is pressing on your brains. Let's go to the ship." The sailors took it gladly. They'd had enough of running for cover when the alarm went off. In the evening, their comrades pestered Rybakov. "Misha, how many days of arrest did you get from the assistant commander for this imitation?" He rubbed his unshaven cheek and squinted his eyes cunningly. "Nothing yet. But it's going to get to you, probably." No, Kabistov turned everything into a joke. And afterwards he himself recalled with laughter how his petty officer made him burrow into the ground with his whistle. When it got dark, we changed the parking place again. We moved to Kylan Bay, narrow, cramped, where in peacetime I would never dare to take the ship. If you make a mistake, you will run aground. But the tugs pulled us in. One of the tugs has been pumping water from our boiler room for the 2nd day already. So far, it's doing okay. Anyway, the ship is not sinking anymore. We've been masking the ship all night, all of it covered with camouflage nets. At dawn, the sailors climbed the mountain, looked from afar. Good, the ship indistinguishably merged with the shore, together with the ship camouflaged and the tugboat, which continues to pump out water. And what to do next? That's what the whole crew is thinking about. I'm conferring with the officers. Booth is talking to the sailors and petty officers. People are willing to do anything to save the ship. We're doing something. Tighter plasters, plugged some holes, caulked some seams. The water in the rooms is starting to recede. But that's not the answer. A wave will shake us in the open sea, and all the hastily applied patches will fly off. Then the tugs won't help. Maybe I should give up everything, ask the fleet commander for permission to leave the ship, form a marine unit from the crew, and go to fight on the land front. Sheet caulk. To avoid decloaking the ship, the crew disembarked. The sailors were housed in the empty harbour workshops. We also equipped the galley on the shore. We dug 2 boilers into the ground. Here we also installed kitchen and dining tables. During the enemy raids, sailors hide in galleries and gorges of the coastal mountains. Only those on duty remain on the ship. On the heights surrounding Kylan Bukhta, observation posts are located. As soon as there are enemy planes, signalers from the heights waving flags. At this sign, everyone goes into hiding, and the duty service on the ship is preparing for decisive action. If the bombs go into the destroyer, together we think about what to do next. Once again, let down the divers. Kozitsets was not satisfied with their reports. Himself climbed into a spacesuit. His own hands felt the underwater part of the ship. Now we know the location of every hole in the bottom. But it doesn't make us feel any better. Workers from the naval factory have come, the very ones we had to evacuate. They're eager to help us. But they're powerless. The factory and the docks are in ruins. And even if it was possible to launch some equipment, we will not be able to use it. Fascist aviation bombs the territory of the plant without end. To lead a ship there means to put it under an inevitable blow. Over the city, air battles do not subside. Our fighters are selflessly fighting in the sky. They are few. They cannot cover Sevastopol from enemy air raids. From morning to night overhead howl aircraft engines, beat anti-aircraft guns, heavy explosions, with mosquito squeak fall fragments of anti-aircraft shells. In a break between air raids, Booth and I walked through the workshops. The sight of them is terrible. Ceilings and walls collapsed from the explosions, rubble filled the machines. Under our feet there are debris of mechanisms, some parts. Sometimes we come across perfectly serviceable tools. Involuntarily we bend down, pick up these valuable things, and put them by the machines. It is terrible to watch the senseless destruction of huge wealth. In a dilapidated warehouse we saw mountains of sheet cork. I took a voluminous and unusually light piece in my hands. This is gold. We buy cork abroad and pay fabulous money for it. And this treasure is doomed to destruction. Timofey Timofeyevich, shall we abandon it? The commissar looked at me in surprise. You are ridiculous. We can't save the ship, and you care about some cork. What good is it to us? Shipbuilders would kiss us for it. Look how light it is. First class. Booth also picked up a piece of cork from the floor, tried its weight. He thought about it. Suddenly he turned to me as if he'd been stabbed in the side. Listen, he began, and his eyes sparkled. I knew what he was trying to say. The thought occurred to me, too, as the commissioner tossed the bulky, porous bar in his hand. Yes, in this cork, in its extraordinary lightness, we saw the possibility of saving the merciless. We will load the flooded compartments of the ship with it. The cork with its mass will displace the water from them, give the ship buoyancy, and then we will not be afraid of the devil. I heard cautious footsteps behind me. I looked back. The sailor artillerymen were looking at us fearfully. And right you can think anything, seeing how the commander and the commissar with clouded eyes stared at a pile of cork and cannot get away from it. Maybe the last bombing mixed up the balls in the heads of the bosses. All sorts of things happen. I smiled. Call everyone to the ship. And hurry up. The sailors gathered at the power station. Crammed in like herrings in a barrel. The commissar and I are squeezing in. Can't we find a room a little freer? It's very cramped. It's more comfortable here, Comrade Commander. Petty Officer Misko answers for everyone. When it's cramped, the head works better. Tightness presses on brains and squeezes out their thoughts. The sailors moved apart, giving us more comfortable seats. I looked around at the sailors. Well, have you thought of anything? The first to ask for the floor was Chief Petty Officer Zemlyanukin. Oh, Comrade Commander, we, the machinists, have talked here, and we have such a thought. There is a lot of sheet cork in the warehouse. We should put it in the compartments. Small pieces can be strung on a wire and loaded in such a way under the piles between the main lines. And we'll put the sheet cork directly into the holds, and to keep it from floating, we'll cover it with planks and reinforce it with stanchions. Booth looks at me, I look at him. No, we didn't make pioneers. Damn it! Why didn't you say something before? The commissar and I were going to stun with our ingenious discovery, and you, as it turns out, reached it long ago in silence. And we've only just thought of it. Well, I say, if so many heads came to the same solution at once, it means that it is the right one. Now all that remains is to work out the details. I have an organizational proposal rises Petty Officer Vakulenko. It is necessary to create brigades already now. Some will prepare the cork at the warehouse, sort it, knit it, others carry it to the ship, others stow it and fasten it in the compartments. Apparently we will have to work at night, so we must clear the way to the warehouse in advance. It's also a big job, and we should start it now, while it's still light. And so we agreed. Kozinets started to organize the brigades. Soon the sailors, stretched out in a chain, began to clear the road from the warehouse to the ship's gangway, throwing aside fragments of brick and stone with their hands. Siknishvili and Nikiforov, recognized masters of axe work as they were dubbed after the story of the half-bank, were making stretchers. Dozens of sailors worked in the warehouse. Fortunately, the enemy planes did not show up anymore, and it was possible to work without interference. With the dusk, a string of sailors with stretchers stretched from the warehouse to the ship. Zemlyanikhin and Vakulenko were engaged in packing the cork in the holds. They were helped by Red Fleet Yepifanov, Sharapov, Krasovtsev, Kuzmin and Kudobin. Since they had to work in the water, they wore rubber suits. In addition, each compartment was equipped with light divers. Zemlyanikhin instructed them in the dry room. Wiggling lizard among the trunk lines, he showed them how to lay the cork more tightly so that not the slightest gap was left. Now the divers were dutifully following his instructions. They worked in semi-darkness, by the light of emergency lanterns. Compartment after compartment was filled with cork. When enough of it was accumulated, pre-prepared wooden sheets were put on top, which were then firmly pressed with supports. Where it was possible, the cork was even covered with iron sheets, which were strengthened with the help of electric welding. By morning the warehouse was cleared. The whole plug, more than 15 railroad cars, was in the holds of the Bezpochadniy. Kozinets and I checked the work of the sailors. Everything was done firmly, reliably. I order the tugboat to stop pumping out water. We wait anxiously. Will the ship sink? No, it's holding. From the compartments come reports that the water level does not rise. An hour passes, another. The roll is eliminated. The ship is on an even keel. It's all right. Not far from us, in the adit of the shooting station, the headquarters of the rear of the fleet. The head of the rear, Rear Admiral, Herr, my old acquaintance. I'm going to him to share my good luck. Seeing me, Rear Admiral raised his glasses on his forehead, asked me caringly, "Well? Your Merciless has not sunk yet." "It won't sink now. We stuffed it with cork, like a swimming belt. Even if the whole hull is like a sieve, it will still hold on the water." "What kind of cork?" Frowned bushy eyebrows Rear Admiral. "Why are you amusing me with fairy tales? This is no time for jokes." "I'm not joking. I came to you, as to his old commander and teacher, for advice. I want to bow to the fleet commander and ask him to give me a tugboat. Let's go south." My interlocutor even got up from the table from indignation. "I look at you, young commanders, and I am startled. How easily you solve all the issues. You see, he decided to swim across the sea on a cork. Understand, head, you won't swim a mile. Your cork will remain on the surface, and you and your destroyer will go to the bottom." All my explanations were to no avail. The Herr came close to me and said in a thunderous voice, "I don't allow it. Do you hear? Not allowed. If you still want to try your experiment, drive the ship like a barge. Take off the cannons, take off the crew. They will be useful here, and you can sink your box in the sea anyway. There's not much use for this leaky vessel now." I took a sheet of paper, and with a pencil in my hand began to prove that the cork would help us. The Herr looked sceptically at my drawings and said his own thing. "You'll go down with an axe. Mark my words. I repeat, you can go, you can't argue with me. But don't involve me in this adventure." In the end, the Rear Admiral waved his hand. "Do as you please. Please go to the fleet commander, he'll tell you off too." But Philip Sergeyevich Oktyabrsky listened to me with deep interest. He made me tell in detail how the cork was fixed, how much of it went into this or that compartment. He asked a lot of questions: what we would do if a storm caught, if enemy aviation attacked, if a bomb hit the ship. I tried to answer as thoroughly as possible. "Well," said the fleet commander, "let's take a risk. Tonight the destroyer Shomyan arrives. He will take you in tow. Prepare everything by then. Just in case, transfer people to the Shomyan, leave only the emergency crew on the Bezpochadniy. If the weather worsens, take shelter in the bases. Don't go to any trouble." "That's a good idea about the traffic jam." "Whose idea was it?" asked Rear Admiral N.M. Kulikov, a member of the Fleet Military Council who was present at the conversation. "Collective." I told how the whole crew was thinking about the salvation of the ship, how at the same time many of them had the idea to use the cork stocks, how the crew worked in friendship, having managed such a complicated matter in one night. "Well done," said Nikolai Mikhailovich. "In general, it's great on Bezpochadniy half a tank was cut off with an axe. Now, saving the ship, they will deliver to our factories almost the whole composition of the scarce cork. And it's all the sailors' ingenuity. You and Booth know how to rely on people. That's good. Keep doing that." I left the fleet commander's office feeling invigorated. Seems like the city's cheerful too. It's nothing that many of its neighborhoods are destroyed, that the beautiful bays are deserted and where the ships stood recently, only swaying on the quicksand lonely, overgrown with seagulls mooring barrels. Sevastopol lives, fights. And I suddenly felt sorry to part with it, though lately I had been thinking only of how to take the ship out of it as soon as possible. On the slope of Kylan Bokhtar, I met the workers of the naval factory. They helped the sailors all night, they worked voluntarily, nobody forced them. I hurry to rejoice them, the labour paid off more than enough. At night, Bezpochadniy will go to sea. The tired faces of the workers brightened. "Pack up, we'll take you with us." "We wish you a happy journey," said the elderly foreman. "And we are staying here in Sevastopol. We are more needed here. We have enough business to do. We will work for the fleet and the front, and if necessary we will take up rifles. We won't part with Sevastopol." No. I heartily thank the workers for their help. They smile embarrassedly. The same old foreman speaks for all of them. We did what we had to do. After all, we serve the same cause. I look at them for a long time. Simple people, purely peaceful civilian people. But we saw how calmly they worked under the bombs. They're unarmed now. But they are soldiers, fighters of an incalculable army whose name is the people. Only a madman could think it possible to defeat such a people. Transition. We're distributing people who will stay on Ruthless, who will go to Shomyan. No one wants to be among the latter. We have to use the force of an order. I announce that I, the Commissar, my assistant, commanders of combat units, petty officers, and the most quick and brave sailors who can look death in the eye will go on the Bezpochadniy. Group commanders will go to Shomyan, with them all other sailors and petty officers. Needless to say, everyone who moves to the towing destroyer considers himself offended. The Commissar and I are forced to talk to almost everyone to prove, to convince. Meanwhile, the ship is finishing the last preparations for the campaign. Divers once again check the underwater part of the hull. Loaded an additional stock of emergency scaffolding. Sailors dragged from the workshop's gas welding machine with cylinders of acetylene and oxygen. In such a campaign, everything can come in handy. Lieutenant Lushin built on the shore those who are leaving for Shomyan. The sailors are frowning, dissatisfied. It seems that our conversations didn't help either. But there's no time to rally. I order to load on the tugboat. We decided that our sailors will meet Shomyan in the northern bay and help its crew to prepare for towing. At night, the tugboats took us out of Kylan Bay. Soon the Shomyan arrived, convoying 3 transports to Sevastopol. We put the towing end on it, our anchor chain. From the Konstantinovsky Ravelin's signal searchlight sends a wish of the fleet commander happy sailing and successful transition. Goodbye, Sevastopol. When will we see you again? Will we ever anchor in your bays again? There is a telephone connection between both ships. I can talk directly with the commander of the Shomyan, Lieutenant Commander Valyuk. He tells me that the passage to Sevastopol was difficult. Fascist planes attacked more than once. It is necessary, while it is dark, to move far away from Sevastopol. Here the enemy aviation is especially furious. I agree with him. saying that the speed of towing can be increased to 10 knots. If the enemy planes strike, give up the tug and dodge. There's no reason to risk both ships. You drop it, cut off Valiuk. We won't leave you to the fascists. We will maneuver without giving up the towing end. At first our sailors were bored on the Shomian, but the hosts gave them warm hospitality. Little by little the guests and hosts became firm friends. People on the Bezpochadniy are distributed in 2 shifts. Kabistov and Yarmak take turns as watch officers. Kozinets and machinists are keeping an eye on the ship's condition. 3 hours after leaving Sevastopol, they alarmingly report that water is coming into the bow of the ship. I ask Shomian to slow down. An alert has been declared on our ship. The emergency crew runs to the bow compartments. Indeed, there's water splashing there. It has risen above the planking, which is covered with cork. Kozinets and his sailors spent a few minutes looking for a breach. The alarm proved false. The water, as it turned out, had gotten here from above when they were sprinkling the upper deck with sprinklers. It was just late to notice its accumulation, because before that all attention was paid to the rooms, where there was damage below the waterline. The dawn caught us in the area of Sudak. An enemy reconnaissance plane flew over us. We decided to stay till dark in Feodosia, where there were several of our ships on the roadstead. In the evening the weather worsened. We were warned that in the Kerch Strait the storm reaches 8-9 points. I consulted with Valiuk about what to do next. Will the Merciless be able to withstand it? He asks. I think it will. Then let's go. In the wind, the Kerch Strait is a dangerous zone. There are many minefields here. Waves often tear off mines, and they float on the surface. We have 2 large hunters at our disposal. They are tasked to check the route of transition, and then accompany us to Novorossiysk. When we left Feodosia Bay, the wind came. It whistles, roars, whips cold water dust in the face. Well, won't our cork fall apart from the rocking? Kozinets reports that it's holding so far. Kabistov disappears on the half-bank. He looks how the towing end behaves. After all, if it breaks, it won't be easy to start it on such a wave. It's good that our towing end is the anchor chain. It sags strongly from its weight and thus softens the jerks. The rocking takes on a threatening character. The ship cracks, creaks. Waves roll across the deck. In the starboard side, in the place where there was a big dent, which we never managed to straighten, a leak opens. The machinists are trying to weld a steel plate here. They succeed with incredible difficulty. A minute later, a wave blows the patch off. Further efforts do nothing. The patch won't hold. It's a good thing the hole is above the waterline. The water only comes in when the wave hits. The pumps have time to pump it out before the next wave. Leaks open up in other compartments as well. Sailors put pillows, fix them with supports, caulk the gaps, but water still seeps in. Most of all, we are afraid of the leak in the second turbine compartment. If it floods, the ship may lose stability. Sailors of the emergency party for a long time cannot find the place of damage. Then they saw that water was coming in through the onboard tank. They drained it immediately. The leak stopped. This night, which seemed to have no end, exhausted us all. But with the first rays of the sun we saw the mountains of Novorossiysk, and at once it became easier. The wind began to weaken. And in a few hours the sea around us was quiet and gentle. We could not believe that it was it that was so rubbing us at night. The rest of the way we passed quietly, except for the fact that on the Sukhumi roadstead we got under fierce bombardment. Neither Bezpochadniy nor Shomian suffered from it. A week after leaving Sevastopol, we reached Poti. Bezpochadniy stood at the wall of the plant. The representatives of the plant, having learned that the destroyer had delivered 15 carriages of sheet cork in its compartments, were really ready to kiss us. And although there were girls among these representatives, the practical Kozinet said, "You don't have to kiss us, just repair the ship faster." Workers had already started to remove the plug from the compartments, but they were stopped by the commander of the squadron. Rear Admiral Vladimirsky, still not quite recovered from the wound, limping, went around the ship, examined the compartments, clogged with cork, and ordered, Leave it as it is. Let others look and learn. The crew stood in even rows on the upper deck. The rear admiral gazed inquisitively into the faces of the men. He could hardly recognize them. Exhausted, thin with eyes inflamed from sleeplessness. Torn, burned, dirty clothes. But pride and joy shone in their eyes. And as if reading the thoughts of the sailors, the commander said loudly, addressing the frozen formation, "That's right, comrades. You have something to be proud of. You fought bravely and overcame thousands of difficulties to save your native ship. I thank you for your combat successes, for your initiative and resourcefulness. We serve the Soviet Union." Echoed a friendly chorus of voices. For a few days, Merciless turned into a kind of museum. Excursionists from all ships of the squadron arrived. Everyone wanted to look at the damage of the ship, to know how with such damage it not only stayed afloat, but also travelled hundreds of miles, fighting storms, fighting off enemy planes. Officers and petty officers took the guests around the ship, giving them whole lectures on the fight for survivability. Eventually the cork was unloaded from the holds. We started the repair. Sailors were hurrying the workers and agreed to work without rest, only to return the ship to service faster, sooner to go to new battle affairs. The shipbuilders thanked us. They needed the cork delivered by us urgently. Without it, the commissioning of several ships was interrupted. The workers of the shipyard paid special attention to the repair of Bezpochadniy, but difficulties arose at every step. The country was experiencing terrible days. The enemy was approaching Moscow. He captured the Baltic states, Belarus, almost the whole Ukraine, many industrial areas. The factories evacuated to the east were still just settling in new places. The country lacked metal, many types of industrial products. We felt it directly. The repair of Bezpochadniy was moving slowly. The plant was in need of the most necessary things, materials, tools, equipment. The crew of the destroyer, which had gone through the battles almost without losses, now began to thin. People were needed on the active ships. Specialists from Bezpochadniy, experienced, tested in the fire of sailors, were taken especially willingly. Those went to the warships with joy. Although they were attached with all their hearts to their native destroyer, but to be engaged in repair, peaceful business, when the fighting does not stop around, was not to their liking. People were eager to fight. Thirst for a feat possessed them. Many of our Red Fleet petty officers and officers, as part of other crews, participated in the Kerch-Feodosia landing operation, made raids to the coast occupied by the enemy, broke through to besiege Sevastopol, and together with its heroic garrison crushed the enemy. The news about the glorious deeds of its pets came to Bezpochadniy. We rejoiced at these tidings, and at the same time grieved who would not be sorry to part with such people. The sailors who remained on the ship worked tirelessly. They put all their energy and ingenuity into repair works. They joined the brigades together with the workers. Between those and others, heated competition. The soul of it was Booth. Our indefatigable commissar was able to ignite the creative fire in people, to inspire enthusiasm in everyone, without which the victory is unthinkable neither in battle nor in the pond. The activities of political officer cannot be squeezed into the framework of the Charter. You can write an instruction on the use of technology, paragraph by paragraph the duties of people serving this or that mechanism. But it is impossible to write instructions on how to work with each person. Political worker must be able to approach everyone, know everyone his needs and demands, tastes and inclinations, good and bad traits of character, know how to influence a person, how to help him develop the best in himself, and get rid of all the bad. It may be argued that this skill is required not only from the political officer, but also from every commander, everyone who deals with people, with their education. No argument, but from a political officer it is required triply. If the crew of Bezpochadniy fought well, it is largely due to the fact that the ship had a wonderful, talented political officer. And the joy of the sailors is understandable when they read in the newspaper the list of those awarded in 1942, in which one of the first was senior political officer Timofey Timofeyevich Butt, who was awarded the Order of the Red Banner. 25 people from our crew were awarded orders and medals for their combat exploits. Among them are officers Yakov Stepanovich Kozinets, Fyodor Andreevich Alyoshin, Vladimir Vasilievich Lushin, Vasily Vasilievich Yarmak, junior political officer Ivan Grigoryevich Noskov, petty officers Nikolay Archipovich Zemlyanukin, Peter Maximovich Vakulenko, Ivanovich Kuksov, Nikolay Semyonovich Lavrukin, Mikhail Savlyevich Rybakov, Red Fleet Anatoly Pavlovich Krasovtsev, Nikolay Andreyevich Prikodko, Pavel Grigoryevich Kudobin, Mikhail Nikolaevich Sharapov. The motherland knows about our deeds, highly appreciates them. That's what these awards testified to. The greatest enthusiasm swept the sailors. The pace of repair began to increase day by day. And here began to arrive exciting news from the fronts. The fascist army was dealt a crushing blow near Moscow. Our troops advanced westward in some places more than 400 kilometers. The enemy retreated near Volkhov and Rostov, near Lozova, on the Kerch Peninsula. More than ever, the sailors were eager to go to sea sooner, to take part in the battles. And a new joy awaited us. In the evening of April 3rd, when the crew, after dinner, as usual, gathered at the loudspeakers to listen to the latest news, there was a sonorous voice of the announcer, who read out the decree of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR. The decree said that for exemplary fulfillment of combat missions of the command at the front of the fight against the German invaders, and for the valor and courage shown by the squadron destroyer Bezpochadniy, was awarded the Order of the Red Banner. The program has long since ended, and we are sitting by the loudspeakers, silent, not believing our happiness. Maybe you heard wrong. No. Greetings from the fleet commander, squadron commander, shipyard staff, from other ships have already started to arrive to the address of Bezpochadniy. A few days later, on the aft flagpole of Bezpochadniy, in solemn silence, slowly rose the flag with the image of the Order of the Red Banner. The line of sailors froze. Each mentally swore an oath to justify by deeds the high award of the motherland, to carry with honour the Red Banner flag of Bezpochadniy through all the battles and trials. Buki Division. Sailors of Bezpochadniy were promoted. We said goodbye to Kabestov. My assistant's cherished dream came true. One day he came to me excited, shining with happiness. Grigory Pudovich. They're giving me a ship. It was not news to me. In a conversation with the fleet commander, I myself proposed to appoint Kabestov as commander of the ship. It was a pity, of course, to part with an experienced, talented officer. But I saw that it was time to give him independence. Aren't you sorry to part with Ruthless? It's a pity. Alexei Nikolaevich sighed. My heart was attached to it. I'll remember it forever. And I will be grateful to you, Grigory Pudovich. You taught me so much. A minute later, Kabestov was already talking fervently about his ship. No, it's not a destroyer, but a gunboat. But it is still a formidable warship. To be its commander is a great honour. And Kabestov was truly happy. Alexei Nikolaevich lived up to expectations. He became a good commander. A few months later, he was already assigned to command a division of gunboats. This division later became famous in many battles. He participated in the liberation of the Crimea and Odessa, fought on the Dniester and Danube. We said goodbye to our commissar. It was, perhaps, the hardest parting. The sailors were walking lost, not themselves, as if they were seeing their father off. Timofey Timofeyevich Butt, a man of great and generous soul, really became dear to each of us. But he, with his indomitable, beating over the edge of energy, has already become cramped deck of the destroyer. He was appointed to the cruiser Red Crimea deputy commander for political affairs. We continued to serve in the same squadron. Booth often came to Ruthless and was always the most welcome guest here. I was appointed commander of a division of destroyers. Merciless was part of this division, so in fact I did not part with the ship, which became so dear to me. Commanders are not supposed to have favourites, but Ruthless has always been my favourite. Our unit jokingly called the division Buki, because the names of the ships began with the letter B: vigilant, impeccable, ruthless, vigorous, fighting. One destroyer leader, Tashkent, broke the uniformity. Labouring division, consisting of destroyers Type 7U, called the Division of Smart. There and the names of ships were corresponding smart, sensible, capable, and so on. Both divisions often went together in operations. Their sailors became good friends. Captain 3rd Rank Viktor Alexandrovich Parkhomenko became the commander of the merciless and educated capable officer who had passed a great combat school. A tall, broad-shouldered bogatier, cheerful and good-natured, he quickly won the respect and love of the crew. One could not wish for a better commander for the ruthless. While the ship was being repaired, I often invited Viktor Alexandrovich to other destroyers, in combat campaigns often entrusted him to command the ship, looked closely at his actions, if necessary, advised on how best to do this or that maneuver. This was not only a test of the new commander. Trips helped him to consolidate previously acquired experience and learn from other commanders. Several times Parkhomenko and I went to besieged Sevastopol. The destroyer carried cargoes, extremely necessary for the defenders of the city: ammunition, medicine, food. On board there were hundreds of soldiers with full equipment replenishment for the fighting garrison. We calculated the passage in such a way that we arrived in Sevastopol in the evening. But even at dusk we had to fight off the enemy planes. The entrance to Sevastopol bays was always the most difficult test for commanders. We were forced to continuously maneuver among the bursts of bombs and shells. The slightest confusion, the slightest mistake threatened disaster. Parkhomenko conquered with his fearlessness. On the bridge of the ship he felt himself in his element, ordered calmly and skillfully. At night, having unloaded the ship, we opened fire on enemy positions. We fired almost the entire stock of shells, then took on board the wounded, and before dawn set off on the return journey to the Caucasian coast. These dangerous voyages our destroyers made regularly. Thanks to the skill of ship commanders and crews, the voyage was successful. The ships returned without damage. The destroyers had enough work. They almost never stood in the base, participated in raiding operations, escorted transports, transported troops and especially important cargo, carried patrol. The absence of any ship in the line created additional difficulties and worries for the rest of us. All of us were impatiently waiting for the repair of Bezpochadniy to be finished, and it was delayed. Only in September 1942 the repairs were finally completed, and my favourite went to sea again. The Buki division was replenished with one of its best ships. It was a joyful event not only for us but for the whole squadron. Masters of the Black Sea. The situation in the Black Sea theatre was becoming more complicated. Having fulfilled their task to the end, in July 1942, after 8 months of fighting, the heroic garrison of Sevastopol left the city by order of the Stavka, even before that our troops left the Kerch Peninsula. In the hands of the enemy was a large part of the Black Sea coast. Nazi troops captured Novorossiysk. Battles were fought in the Tuapse area, where the Germans tried to break through to the coast. At the disposal of the Black Sea Fleet was now, in fact, only 2 equipped bases, Poti and Batumi, and they were under constant threat of enemy airstrikes. And yet Soviet sailors remained masters of the Black Sea. At no point of the coast Hitlerites were not guaranteed from unexpected, crushing fire attacks of our ships. The fascist command did not dare to introduce its large naval forces into the Black Sea, could not establish normal sea routes of communication, and the German garrisons on the coast lived in constant fear. Ships of the Black Sea Fleet made raids sometimes in the most remote areas of the sea, went to such raids and destroyers of our division. I will mention only some of the operations in which participated Ruthless. On October 21, 1942, the cruiser Red Crimea and destroyers Subrazitelny and Bezpochadniy, repulsing enemy aircraft attacks, delivered 3,350 soldiers, 11 guns and 37 mortars to Tuapse. On the next day, Red Caucasus, Kharkov and Bezpochadniy transported almost 4,000 soldiers to Tuapse. During the mooring, the ships were attacked by 4 enemy torpedo boats. They fired 8 torpedoes, but the accurate fire from our ships knocked the boats off the battle course. The torpedoes missed their target and exploded near the shore, causing us no harm. On October 27th, Bezpochadniy and Boyki delivered 1,400 fighters to Tuapse. On December 1st, Boyki and Bezpochadniy went on a raid to the area of Kaliki Kiap, to the Romanian coast. They had a total of 1,200 miles to cover. In order to have enough fuel oil for such a distance, They filled not only all fuel tanks, but also some ammunition cellars, aft trim and roll tanks. The destroyers arrived at the designated point at the appointed time and opened fire. The strike on the enemy facilities with successful explosions and fires were observed on the shore. Artillerymen Bezpochadniy again distinguished themselves with their skill. Having returned from a long raid, Bezpochadniy convoyed transports, again delivered replenishment to the front near Tuapse, and on December 26th went on a campaign to the western shores of the Black Sea. Together with Bezpochadniy, he raided enemy ships in the area of Frontlines Island and shelled the coast of Romania. This time torpedoists of Senior Lieutenant Lushin also had a chance to work. Our ships detected enemy transports in the fog. Boyki fired all 6 of his torpedoes at them at once. Merciless first fired a 3-torpedo salvo, and then, turning around, fired the remaining 3 torpedoes. In addition, artillery fire our ships severely damaged the enemy gunboat, which tried to come to the aid of the transports. On January 31, 1943, a group of ships consisting of the cruiser Voroshilov and destroyers Boyki, Bezpochadniy and Bezpochadniy was ordered to launch an artillery strike against enemy troops near Novorossiysk. Artillerists of Bezpochadniy fired 200 shells at the enemy. Powerful fire of our ships so stunned Hitlerites that they could not make a single return shot. The command of the Transcaucasian Front highly appreciated the sailors' actions. But most of all we remembered the night of February 5th, when the famous Novorossiysk landing operation began. The Black Sea Fleet landed 2 large landing forces in the suburbs of Novorossiysk, South Ozerika and Stanichka. At night, the fire support detachment of the landing force approached the landing area. The ships followed in the line of the keel column, in the head destroyers Bezpochadniy and Bezpochadniy, behind them cruisers Red Caucasus and Red Crimea. The leader Kharkov was at the end. At 2 hours 31 minutes, Bezpochadniy opened fire on the shore with flares. In half an hour it fired 1,500 shots. The dazzling balls drew the sky, illuminating the terrain on which the cruisers and the leader struck with their heavy guns. Having fired almost 1,500 shells, the cruisers and the leader departed, and Ruthless and Bezpochadniy continued to fire on enemy targets. At 3 hours 45 minutes to the shore approached the patrol boats with an assault detachment. A battle broke out. The paratroopers fought selflessly. But the forces were unequal, and they failed to advance in the area. However, their efforts were not in vain. The fighters diverted the attention of the enemy. Meanwhile, a detachment of paratroopers under the command of Major Caesar Kunikov landed almost without losses in the area of Fish Factory, and, having seized a bridgehead, began the liberation of the city. In the battles, the fighting skills of sailors grew, their tactical techniques improved. We interacted more and more successfully with other branches of troops. I remember, during the raids on the Crimean coast, worked well with pilots. Previously, when shelling enemy targets, ships were forced to do without correction, to shoot at areas. This gave insufficient practical effect. But during the fire raids of ships on Yalta, Feodosia, Anapa, our shooting began to correct night bombers, and the results were much better. During the bombardment of Feodosia port, the case went like this. Airplanes dropped over the objects of flare bombs. Merciless and Boyki opened fire. Pilots, observing from the height of the shell bursts, transferred corrections to the ships. This ensured greater accuracy of fire. The gain was not only in this. Seeing the flare bombs, the Nazis did not suspect that they were fired by ships. They thought they were being bombed from the air. During the whole raid, the Germans did not fire a single shot at the ships. Our raids on the coast sowed panic in the camp of the enemy. The Germans interrogated said that Hitler's officers were very reluctant to serve in port cities and flooded their command with reports asking to be transferred to serve in garrisons located in the depths of the Crimean Peninsula, away from the coast. Soviet sailors were masters of the sea. Our surface ships and submarines penetrated into any of its areas formidable, powerful, elusive. And among these ships was almost always the red banner Bezpochadniy. Its crew was considerably renewed, but young people quickly adopted the experience of veterans, strived to keep up with them. It succeeded because it had great teachers such as Kozinets, Bormatin, Noskov, Seletsky, Alyoshin, Zemlyanukin, Vakulenko, Sikneshvili, Kukov. The activities of ruthless took place before my eyes. In campaigns, most often my headquarters was on this ship. I knew that Parkhomenko and his subordinates faster and more accurately than others will understand and implement my plan, and equal to the flagship, and other destroyers will act clearly at sea. In battle, the power of example is extraordinary. Every commander knows this. Merciless lives. Long ago ended the war. There are no more rumbling salvos over the sea, and if you hear gun shots, they now do not disturb anyone. People know that these shots training, it is practicing the ship's gunners, so as not to lose the accuracy of the eye and polished every movement. The Soviet land is blooming, which our people defended in deadly battles, came out decorated with their labor. On the place of recent ruins and ashes grew cities, even more beautiful than before. Above the blue bays rose from the ruins of the new Sevastopol, proud and happy, immortalized glory. Peace reigns over our motherland, gained in battles, sanctified by the blood of heroes. It was won at a high price, and the people cherish it as the apple of their eye. That is why Soviet soldiers, faithful sons of their great nation, continue to keep a tireless watch on the ground, in the air, on the seas. A lot of changes have taken place during these years in our fleets. A new generation of military sailors is taking the warships on voyages. Fleet equipment has changed. Now in the hands of sailors are such weapons, which we participants of the past war could not dream of. In vain we would look for ships in harbours, which once belonged to our division Buki. There is no red banner destroyer Bezpochadniy in the fleet. He served his service, to the end was a warrior and a hero, never once trembled before the enemy. We will not be able to meet many sailors of this ship, who gave their lives in the battles for their native land. So, there is no more merciless? Not true. It lives on. It has long been a tradition in our navy. The traditions of the ship glorified in battles are passed on by inheritance. Feats and glory do not die. They, like a baton, pass from generation to generation, preserving and multiplying. The traditions of Bezpochadniy, combat experience of its veterans, heroism of sailors, petty officers and officers are not forgotten. The actions of Bezpochadniy, as well as other ships, are carefully studied in the fleet. They are reflected in the expositions of museums. Not only the memory of the Red Banner ship is alive, many of its sailors are alive and working for the benefit of the motherland. The name of the former commander of Bezpochadniy, Viktor Alexandrovich Parkhomenko, now Vice Admiral, is widely known in the fleet. Serves in the fleet Commissar Bezpochadniy Timofey Timofeyevich Butt, who is now a Rear Admiral. Every sailor of the destroyer experienced the charm of this passionate Bolshevik, and perhaps that is why some of our comrades followed his path, became political workers. That's exactly what turbine sailor Marchenko did. After the war, he graduated from the military political school. Now Alexei Alexeyevich Marchenko is a captain of the 3rd rank, deputy commander in political department. From him I learned about the fate of Peter Vakulenko. I used to think that the former foreman of machinists would become an engineer, but he also chose the difficult and noble path of an educator. Pyotr Maximovich Vakulenko is the deputy commander of the ship on political part. From the Pacific Fleet writes to me Captain 2nd rank Alexander Mikhailovich Tikhonov, formerly a sailor electrician from the Bezpochadniy. He graduated from the Military Political Academy. Torpedo sailor Mikhail Fedorovich Sheryaev also received higher political education. He made a good, enterprising political officer. Recently in Moscow I met a man in a civilian coat and hat, whose face seemed familiar. Grigory Pudovich, he exclaimed. I recognized him by his voice too. Solovyev. Yes, it was the same Lesha Solovyev, who was a radio operator at the corrective post during the firing of Bezpochadniy on the shore. Now Alexei Stepanovich Solovyev is a prominent worker of one of the ministries. Letters also come from other sailors of the destroyer. Once in a while my battle friends come to me to remember the past together, to talk about life, about our current affairs. People have grown up. Simple sailors became officers, responsible workers. The ardent love for the motherland led them to exploits during the war years. It still encourages them to give all their strength, all the heat of the soul to the national cause of building communism. One cannot doubt the energy and perseverance of these people. They went through the school on the Bezpochadniy. Being on the ships, I inquisitively look at the faces of sailors. These are not the ones I served with. Young people have replaced veterans. At every battle station I see young men who have never been in battle, who have never heard the whistle of shrapnel over their heads, who have never seen the ominous glow over the burning towns and villages. They know about the war only from books and from the stories of experienced people. But look how hard they study, how skillfully they control weapons and equipment, how much will and courage in their views. This is our wonderful youth, ardent, cheerful, tireless in labour and study. These are the sons and younger brothers of those who defended the happiness and future of their motherland in the cruel battles. Young sailors, petty officers are worthy heirs and continuators of the traditions of heroes. The exploits of their fathers and elder brothers, the glory of our armed forces, gained in the fire of battles, inspire them to selfless service to the fatherland. Fighting ships, the mighty weapon of the fleet in safe hands. The young tribe of Soviet sailors will successfully solve any task, will honorably fulfill their duty to the people.